Start broadcast.
Another joke the other day. I said you do a joke about licking a fucking asshole. It's like licking a battery. I saw a guy do it in Vegas. I go, well, that's where he got it from.
You know what that is? That's actual fighting. You know what boxing is? Well, boxing is a very limited form of fighting. It's kind of a silly agreement. Say, like, we hate each other, we're going to fight, we're going to duke it out man to man, but we're only going to use our hands. That's it. What ultimate fighting is, it's the actual sport of fighting.
Joe Rogan will be remembered as a pioneer in podcasting, a positive voice for the comedy scene, and a huge role in the now successful UFC. Joe Rogan began hosting his podcast on Ustream and later YouTube, and paved the road for many other entertainers to host their podcasts on the platform and follow in his footsteps. During the last couple of years, the amount of podcasts that have been made is insane. It's growing exponentially, and everybody and their uncle has a podcast now. After what happened in 2020, entertainers and comics specifically realized the importance of having a podcast. Many have tried different ideas by doing a podcast part-time, only once a week, only for an hour, and with breaks in between whenever the host needs to go on vacation. And then there is the Joe Rogan experience.
Nothing really? Are you serious?
Wait a minute, he's changing flavor.
One of the teachers yelled bad. These farts were.
Let's play this.
That respects women more than I do.
Oh, really?
Nobody would be tougher on ISIS.
The Joe Rogan experience has now been putting out weekly episodes for 13 years now. 13 years of consistently uploading 3 episodes a week. Now, keep in mind, each podcast episode is about 3 hours long, with many of them going over 5 hours and even more. So, Joe Rogan now sits on a massive catalog with over 1,800 podcast episodes in his files. This catalog is so massive and packed with timeless content that regardless of Joe's unusual way of doing business, Spotify was willing to give him $200 million. But Joe didn't do this alone. In 2009, Rogan wanted to start live streaming on the internet after being influenced by Tom Green, who used to host his own online show from his basement.
That don't give a fuck about other people. They get drunk and they want to yell out and they think they're important. They're assholes. If you knew them in real life, for sure they'd be assholes. There's no super cool hecklers. They don't exist.
Back then, Joe's friend Brian Redman used to make websites and videos for comics way before even YouTube was made. Luckily enough, Brian was skilled enough and had technical and internet knowledge to help Joe Rogan set up a live stream. They started streaming to a small audience using a basic webcam, and although the quality was far from the industry standard, the content and Joe's communication skills would cause the podcast to quickly start growing. The goal was for Joe and Redman to have conversations on the podcast, talk on stream. However, Joe realized that Brian wouldn't add much to the conversation, would constantly interrupt guests, and would cause a few fights between them that made it difficult to continue.
When people are creative about things, they pull these things down out of the air. I mean, what are you doing? You're freaking me out.
Why is this bothering
Because
you?
I can see it.
How are you seeing that?
Dude, are we going to do this podcast or are you going to play on that fucking
Hey,
thing?
I'm trying to do some tech support.
I'm having a conversation.
We're not having a conversation. You're talking about theories and I'm listening.
Talk back then, motherfucker.
I'm not going to
doing it more than once when I asked you. It's not tech support,
yes,
dude.
It is.
I'm not at Brian. Stop arguing with me. I'm not asking you to do this.
All right.
Okay? Jesus.
As the podcast quickly grew, it outpaced Brian Redman's technical abilities, and he started to struggle to keep up with the workflow. Him and Joe had a couple disagreements and decided to part ways. Joe quickly took advantage of this new opening and asked for people to reach out to fill in Brian's position. And in 2013, he found a young producer, technical expert, and Googling wizard that would help him take the podcast to a whole nother level. Jamie Vernon. Unlike any other podcast producers, young Jamie has combined his passion with technology production, his education and knowledge of the internet and YouTube culture to give the Joe Rogan Experience podcast a tiny touch of young and fresh energy. Jamie has also been able to keep Joe Rogan grounded in many situations. We all know most people around Rogan are yes men and will agree with every word that Joe Rogan says.
A chip on your shoulder and a thick skin.
The biggest chip on your shoulder.
You also see the drawbacks.
You see a huge drop.
It is tough to deal with, but if
it's the toughest to deal with.
Got a dicey past in terms of the law.
Some would say the diciest.
A rough reason for why
the roughest.
No.
Who knows?
It's fun.
It's the funnest.
Yeah, it is fun.
It's the best.
You feel like this is a dirty business. Like, I don't want to be a part of your dirty
It's the
business.
dirtiest business.
God, this is a disaster.
It's the biggest disaster.
Yeah.
But Jamie has been the only one to challenge a thought and provide Joe with the right information at the time. And if you made it this far, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps out the channel, and we will be uploading multiple videos a week. Thank you. But being able to get along with Joe Rogan is half the work. In order for Spotify to justify a $200 million investment, they had to make sure that the show would continue to perform flawlessly, and Jamie would deliver. The Joe Rogan Experience didn't become the #1 podcast by accident. Behind the scenes, there is a lot of work that goes into crafting an episode that will keep you listening for hours. For example, the podcast is very easy to listen to. Imagine taking a go-kart on a 5-hour road trip at 80 miles per hour. You would be exhausted and likely have some type of brain damage from the intense road vibrations at the end. However, if you took a Rolls Royce on that same road trip, you would really enjoy the ride and likely wouldn't mind driving for many more hours. Rogan's podcast is the Rolls Royce. The sound quality, the intimate table setup, and Joe's ability to keep a conversation going for hours without any hard stops or awkward moments allows you to stay listening for hours without you even realizing how much time has gone by. This could only be achieved with a flawless production team behind the scenes. Since 2013, Jamie has only missed the podcast a handful of times. The dedication to the show is amazing because if you've ever worked in management or ran your own business, you know how hard it is to find great people to help you. And when it comes to something so personal, like a podcast, where the audience really connects with you, the host, and the co-host, having a loyal helper is crucial. The fact that Jamie has stuck around has kept the consistency of the podcast nearly intact. Even through all the major changes like moving to Texas or moving to Spotify, Jamie said yes with no hesitation. And those are huge changes. But I am 100% sure that Joe Rogan is taking very good care of Jamie. Finally, we can talk about his insane multitasking skills. Prior to 2019, all JRE episodes were streamed live, which meant Jamie had to manage switching between 2 to 4 cameras depending on how many guests they had, while also making sure that the video and audio quality were working properly. Not only that, but he would also be so dialed into Joe Rogan's conversation that he would start searching things up on Google even before Rogan brought it up.
And he's one of the best producers in the world now. Not to let it get to his head. And by the way, the funny thing about him...
And one of the best Googlers in the world.
One of the best Googlers.
This allowed the conversations to flow without interruptions while still having correct information at your disposal. And it's no mistake that after Jamie took over, the podcast grew from under 2 million subscribers to over 10 million subscribers on YouTube. This was just before they moved to Spotify. They crushed anyone's expectations of what was possible through podcasting. Whether he knows it or not, Jamie has become a meme in a good way and a standard for a quality production in the podcast industry. Up to this day, I don't believe we've seen a producer that has been able to keep a podcast going for that long, not miss a lot of episodes, and also manage some of the biggest appearances while being live. But young Jamie will be remembered as one of the greats and most loyal producers.